Good morning and or good afternoon or good evening. Thanks for tuning in to us at Safe Software. We're going to present on how to easily transform data into Multispeak and CIM XML. My name is Don Murray, and I'm the president and co-founder of Safe Software, and I'm here with Mark Stokes, who is our pro services guru and team leader at Safe Software. And also on the line we have Dean Hintz, not Dean Heinz, who's going to help us with some questions. Oh, there we go. So there's some pictures, and please do comment on our great hairlines. Okay. That's right. Okay. One thing for attending today's webinar, if you'll have a chance to win some free seats in the desktop online training for FME, that's going to be held December 13th and 14th. At 8:30 Vancouver time. So for you in Europe, it's actually at a same time. Okay. So first, to get going, we're going to launch a few polls just to get an understanding of who you all are and your experience with FME, and of course everybody's favorite format, XML. So first of all, we'll ask you about XML. So how long have you been using FME? And there we go. We can see, wow, they're just roaring right in there. We're about 70% of vote. Oh, 75%. That means we've met quorum. We have to have a minimum of 75% vote for anything in order to be able to close the poll. So we're good there. We'll give another couple seconds. And so now I will close that poll. And then we will let you see, there you go. So you should see the results there. So a good portion of you have not used FME, and well over 60% of you, 70% of you have been using FME for less than 2 years. So thanks for doing that. Okay. So now we'll go on to the next poll, and this one is about XML, and as you know, many of you who know me and Mark, we absolutely love XML, and that's why we're doing this one on CIM, because after all, it is XML and Multispeak. Okay. Wow. Okay. There's a 75% key. Okay, we'll let it go for another few seconds. And almost half of you have not used FME with XML. So we're going to close the poll here.
A state learning this morning.
And share the results for you. And a few of you, 3% of you have used FME with XML a lot. If you're using an older FME, say prior to FME 2011 with XML, then you really should download the latest FME beta 2012 or wait for the upcoming talk there. Today we're using FME 2012 beta for all our XML stuff, because the XML capabilities have really taken off. So anyway, thanks for that. And on to the next slide here. Okay, a little bit about Safe Software. We're based in Vancouver, BC, Canada, and we have a great team here. We really love what we do. We really love getting data challenge problems. So if you have any data headaches, or you're having trouble getting the data that you're working with into the application that you need to use, then please do contact us. We pride ourselves on not just our product, but also on our passion and our support for our users. So if you're interested in FME, or you have FME and you're having trouble doing things, please do engage us. Okay, so what we want to do is help you to achieve total spatial data mastery, with FME. So what that's all about is our real focus is to grow the community and to help all our users become FME experts, so that they can master all their spatial data challenges. And we're almost done with these sort of high-level slides. In this slide, you can see all the different types of data that that FME works with. Of course, the one thing I don't like about this slide is it doesn't have a bubble for XML. But other than that, it's a really good diagram, and you can see all the different types of data: 3D point clouds or LiDAR data there, raster. So no matter what type of spatial data you have, that's our goal is to enable you to be able to move it and get it to wherever you want to use it. And excuse me. This shows the different editions of FME, and a nice cake there, really. And the versions that we're using in this demonstration today is the FME Esri edition, which is in the middle of the stack there, and the Small World edition as well. All the version we're using, the actual versions we're using, is the FME 2012 beta version, which will be shipping sometime in January. Okay, but the diagram shows that really it is each edition from base professional includes everything in the lower edition, just adds more and more functionality. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free.
And so Don, why are you forcing me to use the FME 2012 beta version and sit on the leading edge here rather than FME 2011?
Because it's all about XML, Mark. And FME 2012 is so great with XML. FME 2011 was pretty good, and at the time we thought it was great, but now with all the things we've done with 2012, makes working with XML even that much easier than it was before. So Mark likes working on the bleeding edge too, so we usually get him to install a new build right before something like this happens. And so really the data challenge we're talking about today, we're talking about CIM and Multispeak, which are both XML formats, you can call them. And the challenge is, as always, is how do I get the data from my system into the CIM or Multispeak XML document, or how do I consume those XML documents or messages and get them into my system or systems so that I can easily consume and work with that data.
Oops, backwards. There we go.
Okay, so now I'm going to pass it off to our professional services leader, Mark Stokes.
Thanks a lot, Don. And I'm sure Don will interject as I go along if I miss something along the way that's important.
I won't even wait for you to miss anything, Mark.
That's right. Yeah, that's the way it works here. So today we're sort of focusing our XML presentation on working with CIM and Multispeak in the electric utilities arena. The whole goal of most of what we do here at SAFE is to make data available in another format that or transmit your data to another format. And in this case here, we've got a couple of standard formats that are emerging as recognized standards, the CIM from the IEC and Multispeak from the National Rural Electric Cooperative. And so the goal of both of those formats is to allow you to get your data from a GIS system into other applications in the utility space, EMS and DMS, SCADA, and so on. We do have another poll just to make sure everybody's paying attention here. I think the polls are for just to see who's using CIM and Multispeak. Is that right? Correct? We've got two polls, I think, one for CIM and one for...
Okay. Are you ready for me to launch?
Yep.
Okay. Launching. Okay. Okay. Our numbers are coming in. Not yet. Okay. Okay. So it appears that CIM really is a thing of the future. Over 80% of users. So we're going to close the poll now, and you'll see that over 80% of you plan to, well, I guess 18% not yet, and they don't plan to either, but 64% of you plan to use CIM. So this is a timely thing for you. Okay.
Yep, and then the next poll I think is on Multispeak. Anybody using Multispeak?
Okay. So numbers coming in here. Give me a couple more seconds. Okay, polls are closing. And we'll share the results. And more people are using Multispeak.
So that's
but again, a lot of people
yeah,
planning. Yeah,
right. That's interesting. It actually looks like some people will be stuck with using both CIM and Multispeak, possibly, which is going to be a lot of work in terms of learning. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Don. So CIM and XML or GML strategies and the options you have of working with XML. One option you have is to leverage some of the industry standards and XML tools that are out there, such as XSLT and XQuery. They're all standard tools in the XML kit. It means you have to become an expert in those tools, which for some of us, we might not want to become that.
I certainly do not want to become an XSLT expert.
Yeah, most of us want to be users of the data and not experts within the creation of these data. So that's one of our options. The issue there is that we need some XML experts to maintain those tools if we're going to work with them.
Yeah, I looked for the XSLT for Dummies book, and it was one page, and it says if you're a dummy, you shouldn't be using XSLT. So I was quite upset about that because I'm a dummy.
So your other option is to write some custom code, and that's perfectly fine as well. And we know of people that are doing this, and in certain applications that works very well, particularly if you have control over both the source application and the destination application, and you can keep everything in sync, and things aren't going to get out of date with each other. But again, you still need some experts to maintain that, and if it's custom code, of course, you need people to maintain that custom code. If things change within the structure of the data, and that can include whether the source data model is changing, the application at the other end changes, or
the CIM data model changes.
The CIM data model changes because the CIM distribution model is still in transition, and there's various flavors out there that people are using.
Yeah, there's one thing that's for sure about standards is they're always changing.
That's right, yeah. Unless you have a very old standard.
That's right,
like,
that nobody even bothers to. Yeah.
Electronic navigation charts haven't changed for 100 years, I think, since Christopher Columbus, I think. So what we're proposing is maybe to look at the possibility of using an ETL tool, such as our FME, to do this work for you. And that's really, hopefully we have put together a system that allows a minimal understanding of XML and allows you to focus on your domain expertise. One of the things about working in this space, the CIM and XML, is really the platform differences and maybe reflecting on some of the different perspectives of these differences. And we're going to touch this a little bit more as our presentation goes on. And so just as an example, we could look at the differences between the GIS and, say, a target system such as the DMS. And they're really, in the GIS system, we're focused on assets. Connectivity is important, but it's somewhat secondary. And, you know, we've got a lot of good analysis tools in. But in the DMS, the focus is very network-based and the focus on the network devices. So entities in one platform, in the GIS, for example, may not be relevant to entities that are needed in another platform. And an example that I was recently given is splices in a GIS, which are an important part of the GIS if you're modeling utilities. They're not really needed in the DMS system. And so when you're exporting the data, you can drop that data out when you do that export. In the CIM data model, you need a profile that's relevant for the platform that you're going to work for. Multispeak is a little looser, and so that's not such a problem. But in the common information model, defining the correct profile from database, which we're going to have a look at in a minute, is particularly important. So what we're hoping that we can achieve with using an ETL tool is to separate the format issues, which are really XML, from the data modeling issues, which are the GIS to the CIM schema or the Multispeak schema mapping. And they're two very different issues. One is around just, well, how do I structure the XML? How do I produce that XML? And the other one is about the data model. How do we look at those different perspectives between the GIS and the DMS, for example, and map the GIS data model and structures to the CIM or Multispeak data model. And so using an ETL tool, we can map between an electric GIS data model and CIM or Multispeak data models. And in the case of CIM, specifically the profile that we've decided to work with within the CIM. We can use this the ETL tool to create XML for data exchange messages. So that's we can actually create those XML messages that we can send out. And that avoids us developing custom code. And in the long run, it becomes easier to maintain. And this is really the big benefit of using a GUI-based ETL tool, is that the maintenance over time is a lot simpler. If you embed stuff in code, actually you can often rattle off custom code relatively quickly, but over time that becomes very difficult to maintain. Our focus today is going to be around CIM, mainly because we see it as being more complicated than with the Multispeak. So we can dig it a little bit deeper, but a lot of what we're talking about applies to the Multispeak problem as well. But we are working with CIM because actually that's where I've spent most of my learning experience in here, so that's where we are. So the CIM model is based on tools, a set of tools that they put together, and the main one is the Enterprise Architect data modeling system, and they've modeled that CIM. It's a very electric-oriented model. It's this kind of electric engineering model rather than a GIS model, and so there are big differences between the GIS structures and the CIM structures, particularly around topology, and we're going to talk about that. It's a complex data model, and it covers a wide range, well, pretty well anything you ever want to do in electrical networks, from distribution to transmission, and even generation. So there are pieces of the data model that actually talk about the actual generation side of things. And I think most of the people I have bumped into recently are interested in the distribution side of things, which is still a moving target in terms of the actual specification. And then once you've decided on the data model, and you can pick out pieces of the data model to make the profile that is going to match the destination application that you're writing to, whether it's a DMS or an OMS system or whatever. And then that data is transmitted as a flavor of XML, which is called RDF, which actually I usually forget what that stands for, Resource Definition Framework or something like that. Yeah. So, so that little picture there just illustrates one of the components, some of the topology components that are in the UML data model from Enterprise Architects that the CIM people have adopted. And just reiterating this, because it is very key part of the whole spatial ETL or even ETL tool set, and particularly working with XML, is that we have two problems to resolve. The format problem, which is writing out XML, and then the data modeling problem, which is mapping between our GIS and the CIM or the Multispeak.
Right. And to be clear, FME, what we're trying to do with the format side is make it so that you do not have to be an XML expert. You can just point to the document and an XML document, CIM, Multispeak, and then you can easily get at the information that you want. So you don't have to understand the bits and in bytes of XML. And we know XML is human readable. That's sort of a joke around here. But even so, what we really are working hard at is to make it really easy for you to get at reading and writing the bits that you need to get at. And as far as the data model problem, you still are going to have to understand, use your domain knowledge to understand those data models.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's very much the case. The domain, we want to leverage your domain expertise and allow you to implement that in a straightforward way, or as straightforward as it can be made. I mean, we're not wrapping fish and chips here, so these are difficult problems. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, there's no easy solution. We want to try and make the solution easier.
Yeah, so we don't want, so in order to be successful, we don't want you to have to be a top-notch developer as well as a domain expert. We just need to, if you understand your data and where you want to go, and then our goal is to make it easy for you to do that. I like that fish and chips reference, by the way.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, good.
So what we're looking for is a bridge to span the gap between our GIS and XML representations. In our case, we're kind of focusing on CIM and Multispeak, but this applies to any of the other XML standards that are emerging. That in our case here at SAFE, Don has been focusing on some of those alternative XML standards, which I guess if there's any Europeans with us, that includes Inspire.
Yeah, for 2012 we have a brand new Inspire reader.
Yeah.
So if you have Inspire data, just 2012, pick Inspire and away you go.
So yeah, if there are any Europeans with us, that's a big part. And actually both Don and Dean have been doing a lot of work on Inspire as well. We'll talk about next steps, I guess, at the end of our presentation here. So sort of having put out the backdrop of where we are, we thought we'd break down the challenge in this area into 4 key parts, really. The actual extraction of the data from the GIS, the schema mapping component, which is moving between your GIS data model and the CIM or Multispeak. Some topology issues that arise, particularly around the common information model. I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked at Multispeak that closely yet to see whether that's going to arise there, but I suspect it will. And then, of course, the last step is creating that XML within the ETL tool. So in the utilities arena, where most of us, I think, will be working with CIM and Multispeak, is the GIS. And so what we need to do is extract the data that we need to get out into the XML message that we're going to push across to the destination platform, the OMS or DMS system. So typically that's done by circuit or feeder or something. So you need some sort of a network trace to go on, query the circuit in the GIS, and then make that available to the external system that you're going to export to. That could be something as just making a SQL call or a predicate if you're a small world user to pick out a particular feeder or a circuit. It could be more of a complex query. Most of the destination systems, particularly that we're sort of interested in here, are very sensitive to the network capabilities, so you probably need some network validation. I'm sure we all like to think that our GIS platforms are error-free, but these destination systems are very sensitive to incorrect networks, and so switches that are marked as closed but should be open or whatever. And so network validation is probably a big part of the GIS extract, either within the GIS or FME does have network validation tools as well. You may require to access a secondary database that has assets data in it, so that might need to be merged into the data flow as well. We haven't worked in the CIM or Multispeak too much with the incremental changes, but we don't really see a problem with that. I think once we've fully cracked the issue of getting the complete circuits out, getting out incremental changes. In the case of Small World, that would be looking at checkpoints and different alternatives in Esri tools. Those would be the different versions that you're working in. Then we can send out the different messages. So we haven't done that much work here with that yet. If anybody wants to experiment with that, we'd be really happy to work with you. So that's the first of our challenges, is actually to get out the right pieces of data that we want to get out and do the extract of. And then the next challenge is the schema mapping, is to map between what we have in the GIS and go to what we want. The schema mapping process is very detailed, and if you're getting into a project like this, and some of you may have already done a similar kind of project where you've done a data migration, moving between one GIS platform and another in your organization or something, but it's something that you should never underestimate how detailed and time-consuming it is. You really need a good understanding, or somebody needs a good understanding of what you have in your GIS and what that representation is going to be in the target system. In this case, it's going to be CIM or Multispeak. And in particular in this case, that's kind of complicated because it's not just those XML data model standards that need to be taken into consideration, but how they are then going to be brought into that destination platform. And so it's a detailed process, and when you're starting on a project like this, don't underestimate the amount of time needed to get this right. It's relatively, well, you need a lot of domain knowledge, but once you get started, it's fairly rote, but there is a lot of detail in here.
Mm-hmm. And the reason is that different systems can have a totally different way of looking at things, so it's like almost like a paradigm shift you have to cross. So as Mark says, this is really the crux of the issue, is how do you map from one system to the other.
And then, of course, what you need then is tools to implement that mapping.
Yeah, and that's what FME is all about. Yeah.
So what is schema mapping, for those that you haven't had to do it? It's really where we're restructuring the data. We're mapping from the source data model to the destination data model. We're rejigging attribute names, changing attribute values in some cases. We might have to shift domains or enumerated lists from one lookup type to another. Actually even changing attribute types, might be going from a date field to a char field or whatever. Feature type names, we call them feature types in FME, but those are our table names, feature classes, objects in Small World. So we will need to rename those. So they all needed to be shifted across. You might call a transformer XFMR in your GIS, and it needs to be called transformer in the CIM or something. Geometry changes may need to occur, and we'll have a little look at that in a little bit later because that's kind of related to some of the topology.
And you might even have attributes in the source that that the destination wants that aren't even in the source. What do you do then?
That's correct. Yep, you need to set default values and or invent some values.
Yeah.
And so just there illustrated in that picture there is actually an upgraded version of a tool that's been in FME for a long time, the attribute renamer, and the additional column there on the right, the default value, has been added so that you can set up these schema mappings, and if you don't yet know what the source attribute is, you can leave it blank and it will create that default value for you. So it's a kind of a little mini schema mapper. And using tools like this, it's relatively easy to maintain. So we can see that on if the source data model changes, then we can quite quickly go into one of these and in this case, we're looking at an energy consumer mapping, and we could switch the source attribute. We'll have a quick look at that in a moment. So the schema mapping tools that we have in our FME product as transformers, as the attribute renamer that was on that previous slide there, a copier tool which just allows you to copy attributes and rename them in a similar way. Creating attributes out of the blue, we can create and concatenate attributes and make attributes out of combinations of other attributes. The attribute value mapper in FME is a transformation tool that allows you to build domains or enumerated lists. And we do have a more sophisticated tool. I wasn't going to plow into it today. We've got quite a lot of resources online if you want to explore that, which is a tool called the Schema Mapper, which allows you to put a lot of this information into an external spreadsheet or even a database, build the crosswalk or schema mapping table, and then FME will actually read that in and process that. So sometimes that's more convenient to use that. Sometimes it's more convenient to use the individual transformers like the new attribute renamer and so on. So just to sort of have a quick look at one of those tools, for those of you that haven't seen very much of FME, this is a workspace. So this is FME Workbench, and this is the workspace that we have for doing some of the schema mapping that we have between. In this case, I've selected one that's looking at reading a file-based geodatabase and going out to XML. I've got a bunch of bookmarks.
Mark, what if I had part of my data in one data set and part of my data in the other data set?
And that could be.
Am I able to do that as well?
Absolutely, that could be the case. So you could be extracting GIS information from a file geodatabase, but some of the additional asset information could be in an Oracle non-spatial database or SQL Server, and you could then have both a geodatabase reader and a SQL Server or Oracle or whatever.
So I can have as many different input data sets.
Many different inputs as you want. And same on the output. And in fact, saw an interesting thing the other day is that the CIM, the geometry side of CIM is still a little loose in the specification. And I think that it was not 100% clear how people should be representing geometry in the CIM. And so some people in Small World, what they were doing is they were exporting the CIM data, but also exporting GML with the geometry as a separate output to so that people could see the network representation. So I thought that was very cool as well. They weren't using FME for that, but certainly FME could be used to do that.
They should have been using FME.
They should have been using FME. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, big mistake on their part. So this is just to illustrate how some of these transformers work. This is the new or upgraded attribute renamer tool. And so we've configured it here from my source Esri geodatabase. I've got some attributes that I can map. I'm trying to build a kind of a little standard in my CIM XML attribute naming convention based on the CIM tags and so on. And I just prefix them all with an underscore just internally to illustrate to myself that these are CIM-based attributes. And so here on the right-hand side on the default value, we can set up the default. So if I don't have a rated MVA value, I can set that default value to go out to the CIM. And the same, say, for the base voltage. If I do update my data model, or somebody comes along and says, you know what, we do have a base voltage value, then we can scroll through the list of source attributes in here. Maybe we're going to use the nominal voltage, and that will now be the mapped voltage there. And instead of using the default value here, we'll use the original attribute, and that will get mapped to the base voltage. So the updated attribute rename is very convenient for doing mapping feature by feature, and it's nice because it documents very well what each mapping for each feature is. And again, just if you wanted to be a little bit more sophisticated, you could wrap this up in the transformer we call the Schema Mapper, which basically would have this table here that we see in the attribute renamer in an external spreadsheet, and FME would read that dynamically at the time we ran the workspace. Okay. So topology is our challenge number 3. So we've talked about extracting the data, doing some of the schema mapping in terms of renaming attributes and tables and setting default values. And so now what we need to think about is some of the topology issues that might arise. This is particularly relevant for CIM. As I said, I haven't looked at the Multispeak that closely to understand if there are any topology issues arising there, but I suspect there will be, at least around the issue of complex edges. So most of the GIS platforms support the idea of a complex edge, which is a continuous edge, and then you can add junctions along that where other entities can connect. And particularly in CIM, I know for sure, but I suspect it's the case in Multispeak, is that they don't like that concept. And so wherever there's a junction or a connection of one entity with another, you're going to need to split that complex edge. And then, so then from one linear feature, a conductor, for example, you're going to split that out into 3 or 4 pieces. And that brings up the whole idea of, well, what are you going to do about the numbering, particularly when you're doing exports that need to be consistent. And so you need to be able to have a consistent numbering system or identifiers on these features. So the AC line segment 1000 in this picture here is going to get broken into 3 parts, AC 1000-S0, S1, and S2. And when we export this thing tomorrow, we really need to have the same numbering scheme come out so that the destination system has a consistent set of IDs that it's working with. So that's one area in topology that we're going to need to deal with, is splitting up these complex edges. In the case of CIM, they're also stuffing in additional nodes into the data model, things called terminals and connectivity nodes. So every junction or everywhere entities join, they have a connectivity node, and then on those connectivity nodes they have terminals. So I think of those terminals as being essentially the plug that you plug that device in. So if you're adding a transformer, you need a plug to plug that transformer into the network. That's the terminal. The connectivity node tells you which pieces connect to which in terms of the network model, and then the transformer will connect to the conductor or whatever. In the case of the transformers, that's even a little bit more complicated. And so here's sort of an illustration of some of the topology changes that have to be dealt with when we're looking at, say, a transformer in the CIM data model in this case. So in the GIS, the transformer object is really just a single object, usually, just often just called the transformer. Depending on the platform you're working in, as whether Small World, say, or Esri or G Technology, that may be a single point entity with a single geometry, which is sort of in the lower model there. That's kind of an extract from a typical Esri geodatabase network. This is the transformer here, and the high voltage and the low voltage side connects into that. In the case of Small World, the transformer is often got 2 geometries on it, which has got the source connection onto the high voltage line, and it's got a load side, a point sitting on the load side that has where the connection to the low voltage conductors are. So really this is one object here, and it's connected sort of logically across from the high to the low voltage side. And so we need to account for that in the CIM data model. And so when we convert that single object, even though it might have two geometries on it, in the case of small order or single geometry, we need to build up that topology of the transformer. And in CIM, because it's more of an electrical engineering kind of data model, it thinks of a transformer in quite a different way to what the GIS is. And so they actually model the primary and secondary windings, because in fact within the circuit itself, those two sides of the circuit don't physically connect. There is no connection between them. And then we add in terminals, which are kind of the plugs, if you want to think of it as the on either side, on the primary and secondary winding. They have to be added in. And then the connectivity nodes, which may or may not already exist in your GIS. They may be the junctions or network nodes that you've already built in terms of your network modeling. So quite a difference between the structure of a transformer, for example, in the GIS and the structure of a transformer in the CIM data model. And the ETL tool has to deal with that and build that new topology. And of course with all unique IDs on each of those entities. And then here's the part that Don has been waiting for, is creating the XML. So
this is the most exciting part.
Yeah, so this is challenge 4 within the FME tool, creating the XML. So we have a template approach to creating XML in FME, which we think is a good way to do that. It makes it easy to construct more complex XMLs that have hierarchical kind of data model. We're lucky in CIM, and what I've seen of Multispeak, in that actually they have quite a flat, nice relational XML model, which does make life easier in that context. The trouble in CIM is it's a moving specification, so our little guys are running around with our XML as it changes as we speak. So that is a problem for us, is trying to nail down which particular flavor of CIM, particularly on the distribution side if you're into the distribution modeling. So we need a flexible approach to creating this XML as the specification changes, and something that we can update as we go. And so this is Don in his younger days. He's got
yeah, that's right. Wolverine, my Wolverine days. Maybe the other guy with the six-pack. But anyway, you don't need XML men to solve this problem with
yeah, that's it. And so we're looking at this bridge between the GIS and the XML to create the CIM. So within FME, the tools that we have, the transformers, as we call them for those of you who haven't seen our product before, the core ones are a tool called the XML Template, where we actually build up the CIM. We have an XML Formatter tool, which beautifies your XML documents. And then there is a validation tool in FME. We'll talk about that just briefly at the end there. So what is the template approach to creating XML? Well, steal an example and reuse it. You know, if you're doing,
what if I don't have a sample? What do I do then?
Well, we can't generate them.
Oh, right, the XML sample generator.
Sample generator, yeah. From if you had an XSD,
Yeah,
is that
yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, if you don't have a sample, and that has been a problem for me actually trying to build up the XML examples. Although XML and the CIM and Multispeak are supposedly open formats, it's very closed in terms of people sharing real information, partially because in the utility space, you know, people just can't share data because of privacy issues, so that's understandable.
Yeah, yeah. And in 2012, the sample generators also incorporated right in the templater, so we make it easy for you to do that too. So, yeah.
Okay, so here's a sample of XML that we might get. This is a CIM snippet that's come from a CIM file that represents base voltages and voltage levels. So this is what you would somebody would populate those entities with in the CIM. You can see in the pale blue there are the actual values that are being populated into each of those tags. So the base voltage, nominal voltage is 0.12. And so what we're going to do is take that template and then use it within the XML Template tool and populate it with little bits of XQuery, which look messy when you have to look at it like this, but we'll show you how and why it's easy to do. So basically what we're doing is we're stealing our base voltage tags, and we're replacing the actual values that are in that example that we stole from somebody, and replacing those values with an XQuery. And here we have the FME attributes, and you can see that little naming convention I was using, CIM base voltage, is the FME attribute on the feature that's coming in here. So that would be a bit tedious if you had to do that by hand, but of course if you have a decent GUI to help you, it's not too bad at all. And so that's the job of FME, which we'll have a look at just in 1 second. So the template approach to writing XML works for both complex hierarchical XMLs, like the European Union inspired GML data, or more straightforward relational or RDF type XMLs, which is what Multispeak and CIM are in general. And so we could just have a look at an FME workspace to see what that looks like. So I'm just going to open up a slightly different workspace, and basically this workspace is doing the same, but as the previous one, but it just kind of illustrates that once you've got an ETL tool, so essentially this is the same workspace that I had before, but in this example I'm reading from Small World instead of the geodatabase. Actually it's a Small World XML extract, so in fact I'm going from a generic XML that the Small World tools can dump out into CIM XML. And if you were to look at these workspaces in detail, you'd see that they're largely the same, and all that's really changed is the reader and the writer, and then some of the mappings in those attribute renamers. So that kind of just illustrates how, once you're into the ETL tool, how easy it is to move, update your data model, or completely shift the format as well. Anyway, I'm segueing off there. What we're looking at here is the XML templater, and how we might build up and use one of these templates. So I'm going to open up the properties of the XML templater, and you can see that it's got all the different inputs that we want to work with and build up our XML document from: terminals, switches, energy consumers. I've started to build up a substation here, and what I've done is I've found a piece of XML that represents a substation, and I've started to replace some of the attribute values in here with the XML tag. So here's the XML tag that says, instead of hard coding that value, we're going to replace it with the CIM phases. And so the way we would do that, if we want to set up the nominal voltage, I can just highlight that there, and then I can find out what the nominal voltage will be. Maybe I'm going to use the base voltage, or I think I might even have, well, let's just use the base voltage there. Double click there, and we've inserted the XML tag in there, and now the CIM nominal voltage will be populated from the feature attribute, which is the base voltage. And then that's what we would do just going through here. We would just keep on taking our XML snippets and replacing them with the attributes that are actually coming on the feature here. And once you've completed that, you then have your XML template. I'm just going to cancel that. And
Yeah, so you can see how you don't have to have much knowledge at all about XML.
Yeah.
Once you get a sample, it's understandable enough that you can generally figure out which attributes have to be mapped where.
Yeah. And so the XML template builds up. And what is also very great about the XML template, it actually sorts all these features. So we might have several hundred terminals coming in here. They all use the same little XML template sample, and the XML template accumulates all those, and so we'll have multiple pieces of XML tags with all those different terminals. And then just on the right side here, you can see the other couple of XML tools that we have, the XML formatter and the XML validator. Well, I guess validation could be a fifth challenge to us. So we're writing out all this XML stuff, and well, I guess the ultimate validation is, would it actually come into the destination system that we're working with? But before we do that, we might want to do some validation. So within FME, we have the XML validator tool. That ensures the XML is valid from a syntax point of view, i.e. that tags close correctly and things like that. If you have an XSD, the XML validator can validate the schema as well. So if you have a tool that will generate the XSD within the environment that you're working in, the XML validator will validate your schema as well, which is very good. In the context of CIM, they have adopted a tool called the CIM tool, which is based on a sort of open source platform called Eclipse. And you can use the CIM schema, which is an XML document generated by the UML tool, Enterprise Architect, that we were looking at earlier on. And you can build up a CIM profile for the precise destination data model that you want to work with. And then the CIM tool will take your exported CIM XML and validate that against the CIM tool. I think in Multispeak they have similar tools. I actually haven't had a chance to look at those. We've only just started approaching the multispeak.org folks, so we'll be looking at some of their validation tools as well to see how well FME XML validates against their data model. We're getting close to closing here. We've got one final poll for you, which is kind of interested in what sort of target applications you might have to work with, just to see what we should be researching a little bit more. So just
the poll is open?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. DMS is one that's no other.
Other. So what is other? So at the end of the
interesting.
Very interesting. So that's great. So actually, at the end of the webinar, you'll get there's a little survey on whether you felt this was good, but there is a spot for you to add comments. So we'd be very interested to see what other target platforms you're working with in terms of your CIM or Multispeak, and in particular whether which of those two tools you're working with. Yeah.
So we're going to close the poll, and
yeah.
We'll share the results with you. So yeah, so the other, that's interesting. Yeah.
So most people are actually going right across the board then, really. Once you get this data out of your GIS, you want to be able to push it into the OMS, DMS, and the mysterious other. And I wonder if there's going to be an other.
Yeah, that happens often. Other.
Yeah, so we'll see. XML, yes, reading XML. I mean, we could bring this data back into your GIS. We're not going to spend time today on reading XML. I've got a small workspace example, but we'll leave that for another day. We have a wide range of tools in FME for reading XML. There are no right answers. It depends on the complexity of your XML, what the source XML looks like, what your destination data needs are. Certainly the new tools that we've been adding in FME 2012, the feature path tools are really where you should be starting with. And if anybody has to read XML, which certainly Dean, particularly who's sitting answering some questions, then he would be interested in digging through some XML that you might need to read into a GIS platform.
Yeah. In general, reading XML is easier than writing it, so we focused on the the harder side of it here.
Yeah.
And of course, there's an XML challenge. So if anybody has any XML documents that they're struggling with and they would like to submit them, I think the email is xml@safe.com. So we're always looking forward to those.
So just in summary, we've covered off writing XML, looking at the schema mapping tools, some of the schema mapping tools we have in FME, problems around the topology restructuring, which I've worked with quite a bit on the CIM side to build those kind of things like the transformers and splitting complex edges. Using the template approach to produce your XML, which reduces your need to understand the XML syntax and so on, we hope. The goal, as always, is to reduce the long-term maintenance of the application. So as things change, you can quickly update the workspace that you have with the new either changes in your source data model, changes in the destination CIM data model, or maybe just a new CIM profile that you have to support within your organization.
There we go. Thank you, Mark. And in case there's other people within your organization or you want to take a look at some of this webinar later, today's webinar is recorded and will be made available on our website. If you go to our website, you'll see recorded webinars right in the front page there. And this one will be put up there. Also, if you want to try out FME for CIM, Multispeak, or anything else, we're happy to give you a free trial of FME Desktop, personalized web demos. Upcoming is going to be a weekly intro to FME Desktop. And again, if you're evaluating FME and you have any questions, please reach out to us and describe your problem, and we'd be happy to support you and help you determine whether FME is right for you.
Absolutely, and support@safe.com is where the group of people that I work with are watching those emails coming in. So if you have any questions about FME, support@safe.com is a great place to go.
Yeah, and for other next steps, if you want to expand your knowledge of FME, there's you want to find out about our webinar series, there's the link there, safe.com/learning/webinars. And you'll have a full list of our upcoming webinars as part of our webinar learning series.
And I will just add there, as Donna is going to be doing, in the early new year, we'll be doing a couple of webinars on reading XML and writing XML. So more of the gritty details of dealing with XML.
Yeah, and it's going to be very exciting. There's nothing as exciting to me as reading and writing XML. So if you love XML or you know people who love XML, be sure to pass the word that exciting set of webinars are coming. They're going to be a lot of fun. There's also, if you want some more look at the upcoming training, we have a very vast online training options, both trainer-led and on-demand. And there's also in-person training that's available from us and other FME certified trainers.
Yeah, and Dean is also be helping Don on that. And I see he's been firing off answers to some of the questions you've been asking, so thanks a lot, Dean.
Dean's also one who loves XML.
I think we have the final poll. Do you want to win FME Desktop Training?
Okay, so let's launch the poll. Here we go. And let's see how many people. Don't be afraid. Initially there for a brief second it was 100% no thanks. But fortunately that was with only 2% of the polls in.
And just to say, just sometimes people are interested, we've had just about 50 people attending the webinar this morning, which is great, considering we're in such a
specific topic,
specialized field. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for your time. Absolutely, we really appreciate it. And if you have any comments on ways we could improve the webinar or other things, CIM and Multispeak, that you'd like us to cover in the future, please let us know. So, okay, we're going to close the poll. We're over the 80%, and we'll share the results on this one. And just 56% are going to enter to win. So that's
great.
And the other 44% are already have taken it, and they want to give those other 56% a better chance.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
And
now, questions. I think you've all been firing off questions to Dean, so he's been responding to those. If he hasn't been able to answer any of your questions, we'll follow up with a separate email to you to try and address anything. Like I said, if you have further questions after the presentation here that come to mind, hit us up at support@safe.com, and we'll pile those onto Dean as well, because he's good at this stuff.
Yeah. And if you are using FME now, or you downloaded and have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. One thing we pride ourselves on at SAFE is the restaurant model, and that's not, we don't just focus on the product. We focus on having a good product, but also on our service. So please do put us to the test. We also have a great knowledge base. How do I find that, Mark? What's that? Is that from our homepage too, or?
Just probably the best is just fmepedia.com.
Okay. And so if you want to do that too, or just feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to hear from our happy customers.
Maybe we'll include that link in our follow-up email, which we will send as a result of this webinar, thanking you for all attending and where you can find resources. As we said, it's recorded, and the workspaces I was illustrating briefly there will be made available, so you can poke around in those if you have a copy of FME, and if you don't, you can download an evaluation copy. Make sure you are working, as we said earlier on, we are working in the FME 2012 beta release. It's in a very good shape right now. Its release is scheduled to go out in the new year, and so it's in good shape. And but you should be using that if you're starting to explore the use of XML with FME. We would really recommend you start off in FME 2012 as your starting point, I think.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you, Mark and Dean, too, for getting up early to take part in this webinar.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody, for attending. I think we're going to close off now. And that's goodbye from me, and goodbye from
me and Bulgaria.
Yes.
Thanks, Dean.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. Okay, bye.
Bye.